So the reason why I think Slate coasters are the best beginner project is because the barrier to entry is so low. So for a Slate coaster, you're talking £1 each. Whereas if you were to take a slice of oak, so you have to buy the oak itself, then you have to machine it. A lot of people won't have the tools to machine something out like this. You can purchase it as like a sheet material if you wanted to do it out of MDF. It doesn't have to be solid wood. But if you got this wrong, you would have to throw the whole lot in the bin. With Slate coasters, with a bit of sandpaper, you can take this finish off, you can bring it back to being blank, recoat it, and have another 2 or 3 attempts on the same coaster. So with that being said, I'm going to go over how to prep these tiles to get this kind of effect. So first of all, what we're going to need is an aggressive sandpaper. This is 120 grit. This is going to flatten our slate. At the moment it's textured. And after we've flattened it with the 120 grit, we're going to take a finer sandpaper. This is going to be 400. This is the only thing that I've got because I've left my sandpaper at work. But you can get away with like 320, maybe 240, something like that. As you'll see, when we've flattened this slate back, we're going to have lines left over from the more aggressive sandpaper, so all the finer sandpaper is going to do is take those lines out. So if you've got more aggressive sandpaper, you can use the orbital sander to do this step. As I don't, I'm going to have to do it by hand. So we're just going to take this textured slate first, and we're just going to rub it backwards and forwards. As you can see, this lighter grey is your flat spots. Once the entire slate has got to this light grey, we can move on to the finer sandpaper. Right, as you can see, there's a lot of marks on the top here now. So all we're going to do is take the orbit sander and we're going to make those lines disappear. So I've just done a patch there. And what you can see is the difference between the 400 and the 120. Grit is probably way overkill, but unfortunately that's all I've got, and sometimes you've just got to use what you have available. From there, all we're going to do is take a microfiber cloth and just give it a wipe down. Just need to make sure that all of this dust is off before spraying them. Right. Just make sure that you've shaken it well before applying it. We're just going to spray from left to right, about 10 inches, about a foot away, and we're going to apply it from left to right and get an even coverage all the way across the tile. So notice when I sprayed this, I sprayed every edge first, and then I've gone across the slate in one direction, and then I've gone 90 degrees to it and put another coat on. That's going to give us a nice even coat on the top of our slate. Now we must let this dry until it's fully cured, otherwise our laser's going to have issues. So if we go across to Amazon, these ones right here are the exact slate coasters I purchased. If we click on a different picture, we can see that it already comes with the rubber feet on the back. As you can see here, I haven't done anything to the back. They come with the rubber feet already installed. You haven't got to do anything else to it. So not only is it a great beginner project to start with, but you can start bringing back some income to pay off your machine. And one of the best things about this is this was actually done on my old diode laser. It's probably 2-3 years old now. It's an O2 LaserMaster 2 Pro. I basically decommissioned it because I was having issues with it. I actually brought that back from work, and when I took a look at it, it was actually a mechanical issue. All it was a couple of grub screws that had come loose, so I've just replaced those, Loctited them in, and within half an hour it was then working again. If you were to get the same machine now, it would cost you roughly about £300. and you could start doing things like this with this kind of detail straight away. Right, anyway, we're going to head over to Lightburn, and what we're going to need to do first is create a 100mm square, because these are 100mm coasters. Going to bring this onto the center of our workpiece. So a lot of people struggle with alignment when it comes to where they're placing their coasters, when it comes to repeat engraving. So what I like to do is create this square, draw that square on a scrapboard, and every time you go to place a coaster down, you just place it in that square. So once we've laser engraved our square onto our sacrificial board, we're actually going to change this blue layer to this orange layer, which is a toolpath layer, and you'll find it at the end of the row at the right hand side. You'll see T1 and T2 at the bottom, and what that means is that if you accidentally select this whilst trying to engrave your picture or your text or whatever you're trying to engrave on your slate, what it'll do is it'll ignore this outline. The worst it'll do is it'll just do an outline around the outside, but the laser won't be on. So I always change that square to a toolpath. It can be either the orange or the blue. So the reason why I think engraving pictures onto slate is great for beginners is that not only do you have 3 or 4 attempts to get this right with one coaster, which is only going to cost you £1. If it goes wrong 4, 5, 6 times, you've lost £1. But it gives you a chance to learn what settings are appropriate for specific materials. So the settings that you would dial in for slate is going to be different to what you would if you're engraving on wood, if you're engraving acrylics. All materials are going to have different settings. But if you start with anything like this, when it comes to engraving, it gives you the knowledge to go forward and apply this to other things. So I'm going to show you my process on how I get this detail of image on a £300 laser. So I'm going to show you the process that I go through every time when it comes to engraving photos. I've been doing it constantly now, pretty much for 4 days in a row. It's supposed to be on holiday. If you haven't done so already, make sure you give the video a thumbs up. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to engrave a picture that I haven't already engraved, just because you're going to know as much as I'm going to know when it comes to what we've got to do with a different image. Like, it's not fair for me to just go in and show you the settings for a picture that I've already done. We're going to go from scratch, and then we're both going to find out at the same time how well the image actually comes out. I found a photo earlier because I've literally got about 6,000 wedding photographs. So this is one of my favorite pictures from the wedding day. It's me and my wife outside our venue, and we rented a carousel, which was an absolute delight. I'm just going to minimize this, and then that way I can drag and drop this off of the desktop. I'm going to bring that back across. Open this up. So as it stands at the moment, this is a huge picture. At the moment, it's retaining all of its detail. So what I'm going to do is click on the square icon. I'm going to drag out a square and make it a toolpath. Make sure that it's selected. Now I'm making sure that it's an actual square. So I've held Control and Shift and dragged the cursor out to create that square. And what it's going to do is just give me the aspect ratio for when I shrink it down. And all I'm going to do is bring this orange line in until it's cropped into a point where my wife and I are the center focal point. I kind of want to get my ring in on my hand, so if I just bring that down here, so we've got a bit of railings at the back there, top of my head, just going to bring that up just a fraction. Okay, so we've got our frame roughly in the position that we want it on the photograph. So what we're going to do is just select the photograph and the frame at the same time by going below the photograph, clicking up and to the left. You will see that the green box has appeared, and we're just going to let go, and that's going to select both the photograph and the frame. We're going to right click, and that'll bring up this pop-up menu, and what we're going to click on is this apply mask to image. Now at the moment the photograph is still there, you just can't see it. It's only through that window that we've created with that frame. Now if we just click on the photograph itself, so the frame is not selected, we can click on the frame. So that's now the frame selected. The photograph is still there, you just can't see it. Now we can move it left and right. So you can move the window, we can move the frame as it's acting like a window. So we can get our frame centered over the top of our photograph. If I just zoom in here a sec. Now what we're going to do is just click off of that. We're going to do the same again. We're going to select both. Now you can see the border of the photograph is still there. We're going to right click, and we're going to go to flatten image mask. If you wanted to remove the mask because you want to get the picture back, it is still there. It's just hidden. So I'm going to go apply mask to image. So we've got our window. We're seeing the image through our frame. We're going to right click and go to flatten image mask, and that's just going to destroy the image that was behind it. So if you click off of it now, there is nothing around that frame of the window. Now that our image is basically cropped, we just need to make sure that this negative image is turned on, because the laser normally when engraving, it will, all of the darker pixels, it will burn those, whereas when we engrave on slate, we want to do the opposite. So we want to leave the black paint on the slate, and we want to remove it where the image is lighter to get those shades of grey and the whites. So if we come across to our picture, we're going to right click and go to adjust image. And when you get here, what you're going to come across is the preview of the image beforehand. We're going to use grayscale as our image mode. Usually it comes up with Stucky or Jarvis, something different. Make sure it's on grayscale. That'll give us the best images possible, because it's going to shade according to the power that you give it, set within the parameters of these adjustments that we're going to do now. At the moment, our image is set to how the laser engraver is going to burn. So what we need to do with light burn when it comes to adjusting images is try to find the balance in which our power scale is going to engrave all of these shades of grey. To do this, we're going to slide the gamma bar all the way to the left, and we're going to get an absolute black picture, okay? And we're just going to creep this up until we see that the whites are coming through on the shadows here. So you can see underneath my waistcoat it's black here. It's now completely white here. So we're just looking for the drastic parts of the image that are black to make sure that they are completely white on the opposite side. And then what we're going to do from there is, with the brightness and the contrast, is to pick out those finer details. So with the brightness, I'm just going to bring that to the left, and you can see now that the really white parts are kind of staying there, but at the same time the whole image is now going grey, and it's that fine layer of greys where we're going to get that detail. Going to bring the contrast up just a little bit, so it's going to give us a more defined image when it comes to the opposite sides of the scale. So we've got some extreme blacks in the background here, which are extreme whites here. We've got quite a lot of detail in the beard right here. That's going to come out super well. So we're just going to bring up the enhance radius bar just by a couple of points, and what that's going to do is just give us really nice crisp lines when it comes to the enhance amount. These two bars work in tandem with one another. If the enhance radius is 0, it doesn't really do anything. And we're going to bring up our sharpness level to around 200-300, somewhere around there, and that just gives us a little bit more of a crisp image. So if we go across to the preview window here, we can have a quick look at what the laser's going to end up doing. And as you can see, we've got this red bar on the outside. Yours might not have that. It's a setting that I like to have when engraving photographs. It's a little bit controversial. What it is overscanning, and I like to have mine set at around 5mm. So I would like my laser to, as it comes across, it will pass and it will turn itself off when it gets to the edge here, and then it will come past, and then it's got time to slow down, speed back up, and start engraving at a constant speed again. Because when your laser engraver is running, and it's running quickly, you're getting that vibration and movement, and if it doesn't have time to pass before turning back on again, you'll get those movement lines within your graphics. So better to be safe than sorry, in my opinion. So that's this setting here. This overscanning, I like to have roughly around 5mm of travel afterwards. It's not a lot. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to make this a 100 by 100 slate tile. And all we're going to do is stick that in our border frame. We're ready to engrave. Actually, before we go, so if you have a diode laser and you don't want to go through all of the fine-tuning of settings, I would just have a rough baseline of 410 dpi, because for most 10-20 watt lasers you're kind of talking about a 0.06mm dot that converts to roughly 410 dpi. You can find out what dot size your machine has by researching dot size of Otour, whatever, Xtool, whatever, NAJ, whatever. You'll be able to find within the manual what your dot size is. Just go for a rough idea of what that dot size is and put it in your line interval right here, and that'll give you a half decent image without having to fine-tune everything. If you do want to find your best settings for engraving anything, I do have a video that I'll link down in the description below. If you have a 10 or a 20 watt laser and you don't want to go through that video, it's a fairly in-depth video. Keep your minimum power to 0. For a grayscale, you may get inconsistencies because your laser might not power on until 1 or 2%, like mine doesn't power on until 2% on my diode laser. Max power, I have mine set to 22 max power. That's for a 10 watt Otour Laser Master 2 Pro, and the speed is 8,000. That's 8,000 millimeters per minute. Okay, not seconds. So if you just want some basic guidelines to try out straight away, give it a go, see what kind of image you get. If it's washed out, then you've got too much power, or you haven't adjusted your image quite correctly. Okay, but I would recommend you go have a watch of my other video, which will showcase how to fine-tune everything when it comes to engraving images. Okay, we're going to go and watch this engrave together, so you know as much as I do how this picture is going to come out. So like I said on screen, what we're going to do to begin with is place our coaster. We're going to bring our laser engraver across. So all I've done is I have brought my focus slightly lower than the height of the top of the slate. That just gets me out of focus a little bit. What I'm going to do now is hit home on the screen. That's going to bring the laser engraver back. I'm going to remove the coaster. So I've changed that orange layer to a blue layer, and that way I can engrave the sacrificial board again, like I've already done here. Just going to hit go, start. So now we know that we place our coaster in between those lines. Okay, I just checked all my settings. We're just going to hit go and we'll see how this plays out. So let's take a look at the results. You and I both didn't know how it was going to turn out before it started engraving. It has come out quite well. I'm trying to get the camera to look at it a bit better. Now, I have noticed something that I'm not 100% happy with, and that's just where my trousers are here. It's extremely dark. Now, if I was to bring the darks lighter, then I may have got a bit more detail in the trousers here, and maybe a little bit more in the hair, in my wife's hair here, but I may have lost the detail elsewhere because there is a lot of white in this photograph. Like, my wife's dress is completely white, so it may have blown out some of the detail on there. But there is a phrase that I really like, and I heard it a couple of weeks ago, and that's, an artist's work is never done, it's abandoned. And I think that's quite true, because you could pick any one of these tiles, any one of these pictures, you can literally say the same thing about all of those. There's always going to be something that could be a little bit better. Yes, if it's not acceptable to sell, if it's not acceptable as a gift, you can sand it back and redo it. You can respray it, re-engrave it to get a better image. But if you're chasing perfection, it will never ever be done. It will always be an outstanding project that'll never be finished. So I hope that this video has helped you in some way to inspire you to do slate coasters when it comes to pictures, because it's not that difficult. There are other platforms in which you can use, like Engraver, that basically do all of the editing for you. I've had mixed results from it, so that's why I would prefer to try and show you how to get the results that I get solely using Lightburn, because Lightburn for me is just the best software that you can use for lasering. That's just my opinion. If you have your own opinion, if you know how to use Engraver, chuck some information in the comments. That'll help me. It'll help others. Don't forget to hit that like button. Because you've watched this video all the way to the end, YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy this video next.